Hello, I'm Frank McSheen with Square Peg Consulting at the Whiteboard. I'm a supply chain cash guide, and these are the components of the business-to-business supply chain as I see it. And there are opportunities to generate more cash in every part of this process. Let me show you what I mean. Today's session, we're going to focus on a way to generate more cash where we start with the answer. And this is in particular a situation where there's a need to turn things around or make a significant increase in a short period of time. And the approach is called zero-based budgeting. And zero-based budgeting is really, it's a way of looking at your business as if you were going to build it all over from scratch, right? So if you're in a position of losing money, you're not getting the earnings that you want, things are taking too long, not enough change is happening, this is an approach that can help accelerate your generation of more cash. And you start with the answer, which is, what is the net income that you need or want, right? So we determine what that is and what percent of sales that might be. And we have a forecast of revenue up here, right? Forecast revenue dollars up here. So this we know, this we can determine what we want to have. So this is the answer. This is the answer you want to start with based on this forecast. And then you start to build up the pieces of the business that get you to this answer, right? And they can't be any bigger than what will give you this percent of the forecast revenue. Can't be any more than that. So it starts with assumptions around SG&A, interest, taxes, etc. You start with some assumptions around there. That gets you up to some sort of an operating profit. Number, okay? This is the target for your operations, sales, supply chain people. This is the thing they have the most control over, is this one. So then above that, you've got indirect cost, and you've got direct costs. And so we start to look at the elements of this. Most budgeting is done by taking last year's results and tweaking those to fit this year. And what happens is it gets you into this mindset of if I have to increase my profitability, I start to whittle away at the things that on the cost side. Because we know our forecast number, I start whittling away either direct costs or indirect costs. We might be able to attack some SG&A down here as well. Let me make that a little neater, SG&A. So, but in the zero-based budgeting, you don't whittle down. You start with zero, and you start to prioritize, what do I have to have? So you look at each line item, each element of these, and you have to have, or you want to have. Those are two different categories. And we start to identify things that fit in this category, and here's category over here, or a portion of a line item could fit in both. So you could have some percent here and some percent over here also. And we're going to try and build up what has to happen in order to run the business and accomplish our goals. We got to get through these. And what happens too, as you're going through this, you start to find out, what are my assumptions about these things, about have to have or want to have. In a paper company I ran, we had an assumption that we needed pine to make a type of paper that had this high tensile strength for cement bags and seed bags and food bags, those kind of things. And so we had to buy pine from a long distance away, very costly, and that turned out to be a very expensive assumption. Well, when we actually examined the capability of the machines and our operators to make this tensile strength without pine, we found we could do that and still meet the customer requirements. And so what had used to be a have to shifted over into a want to or a nice to have, and actually shifted over to not needed. And so we were able to really take that whole chunk of cost out of the equation, and the profitability on those products went way up. So you go through a very rigorous discussion about what's really have to in here and must have, and it can't ever exceed the number that will give you this answer right here. The operating profit, based on all these other assumptions down below that get you to net income, the operating profit can't be less than whatever your goal is. And if we know our forecast revenue, the cost can only be that difference. So as you start adding things in, you build from zero and you add all these have tos or assumed have tos until you get to that number that you can't go past. And if there's more have tos that come in there, you got to go back to the ones before and start figuring out, how can I do this differently, or what portion of it is have to versus want to. And so I start to get to my answer from a cost point of view that's going to generate the cash that I need here to end up with my net income down below. Some people think this is a very complicated process. It's not. It can take some time. It takes mostly challenging our assumptions and making sure we start with zero and add from there up to the answer, the limit that we have in terms of our cost between operating profit and revenue. And then visiting those assumptions very rigorously, challenging our assumptions in order to find out what really is have to and what really is want to or nice to have.